I lost 20 pounds in my 50s after decades of weight challenges and all without dieting. And I want you to steal my strategy so you can do this too. Because we think once we hit our 40s and 50s, that weight loss becomes an entirely different game that's just difficult to win. And especially when you're doing everything right, but the scale won't budge. We think, oh, maybe we're getting older, or we blame our slow metabolism, or we think this is just how it's supposed to be now. I'm Holly Bertone, and today you're going to see that weight loss is not luck. You're going to get the 4 steps that I used to lose weight in my 50s, along with the 4 simple shifts that made it permanent. And your favorite part is going to be how you can break through that final plateau when those stubborn pounds refuse to budge. Even if you're like me, and if you've struggled with your weight and overeating your entire life, it is time to get off the diet roller coaster for good. Before I share the exact process of how I lost the 20 pounds and kept it off and completely destroyed the food monsters in the process, it's important to level set where I'm coming from. Because chances are my background and relationship with food and my weight is probably pretty similar to yours. I can't remember a time in my life when I wasn't a sugaraholic or when I wasn't inhaling junk food. And growing up, it was Lucky Charms and Golden Grams for breakfast. And then after that, I lived on Velveeta cheese and pudding pops and ice cream and brownies and Domino's pizza and Pizza Hut pizza and my mom's famous lasagna. Now, I was always pretty active in my youth, and it started with gymnastics and then field hockey and track, which kept my weight in check, even though I was still eating all of the sweets and the treats and the junk food. During my college years and early 20s, wasn't just the freshman 15. I gained 40 pounds. And then in my late 20s, I started racing mountain bikes and I started hitting the gym. And then I lost those 40 pounds and I went back down to weighing about 110 pounds, which is a healthy weight, is actually my ideal weight for someone who is 5'1". I'm 5'1", so to put it into perspective. Well, here's the crazy thing, is that anyone would have looked at me back in my 30s and said I was the epitome of health. I was thin and I was a competitive athlete. But my eating habits, they never changed. I lived on French fries and pizza and pasta and Reese's cups and ice cream. In my 20s and my 30s, my diet was, I'd say about 95% just junk food and processed food and sugar-filled sweets. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was eating my emotions on a daily basis. I ate when I was bored and stressed and any kind of big emotion. And I didn't even know how to stop. When the food was in front of me, I just inhaled it. I didn't even taste it. I didn't even enjoy it. I'm eating a piece of cake and of course the corner so I can get extra frosting. And I ate it so fast, I didn't even taste it. I didn't even enjoy it. I emotionally ate my way through breast cancer. I'd stopped at Dairy Queen on the daily to get a Blizzard because that was my reward for making it through cancer treatment. I mean, no one's going to argue with that. But here's the crazy part, is that after treatment, my mouth tasted like metal and I felt sick to my stomach. I was completely nauseous. I didn't want to eat anything. But I stopped at Dairy Queen to get that Blizzard because that was my way of coping. That was my way of finding comfort. A few years after I had left the FBI, I became a health coach. And despite being an emotional eater, still as a health coach, I was able to maintain a healthy weight, and I justified it. But then I turned 49, and there was a huge difference between what I looked like at 48 and what I looked like at 49. Because that's when the 20 pounds I felt like they just packed on overnight. I literally felt like I woke up one day and then all of a sudden, boom, I'm 20 pounds heavier. And I found myself on the diet roller coaster again. Here's the craziest thing. Again, I was a health coach at that point. So my eating habits had changed over time. And at that point, I was eating what I would call quote unquote clean and healthy. I'd say 90% of the time. It was Monday through Friday afternoon. I was doing cardio. I was doing strength training. I was doing all of the right things, as they say. But then on the weekends, it was that 10% of emotionally eating. and I would treat myself and I would reward myself on the weekends. And maybe you're listening. Maybe you are one of those reward eaters. Maybe you're a weekend eater. You work hard all week, you eat good all week, so you reward yourself with a treat, whether that's in the evenings or on the weekends. Well, this is what my weekend would look like. I'd have in my head, I'm like, I'm going to have 1 pint of ice cream to last me Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Everything in moderation. And in my head, it made sense. Like, no one's going to argue with that. But what it look like instead of 1 pint to last me all weekend long, I ended up eating 1 pint on Friday, 1 pint on Saturday, and 1 pint on Sunday. So I would eat 3 pints of ice cream every single weekend. Do you want to know what 3 pints of ice cream is the equivalent of? It's about 3/4 of a half a gallon of ice cream. So you know those big half-gallon tubs? I would eat almost an entire half-gallon tub over a weekend. And I would eat the ice cream. I would make this huge bowl of popcorn on the stove. So the homemade popcorn on the stove. And then every once in a while, I'd throw in one of those, what they call healthy chocolate bars. And I convinced myself that I was eating healthy. And it was the treat was healthy because the ice cream was vegan and made of almond milk. The popcorn was homemade. It was on the stove. And the chocolate was one of those, I like the Who HU brand, one of the healthiest chocolate bars they make. And when I counted up the calories, I was still eating a normal daily calorie intake. So if the calorie math was mathing, even though I was reward eating like that, I should not have gained 20 pounds overnight. Now, for some people, a 20 pound weight gain doesn't look all that bad on them. Depending on how tall you are, it may not even be noticeable. But for me, at 5'1", I was so inflamed and bloated and puffy. I just hated the way I looked. And then I would try to put on my clothes and I felt like a stuffed sausage. But worse than that, as a health coach, it was embarrassing. The shame and the guilt it was suffocating, and I felt like a fraud. Because why should anyone listen to me if I looked like that? And what was worse was that nothing, absolutely nothing that I had been taught in school worked anymore. So I had the formal education and the certifications, but I was also someone who was jumping from diet to diet to diet. And this was consistent starting in the 90s. So over the past 30 years, oh goodness, where do I even start? I've done Dexatrim and Atkins and South Beach and Slim Fast and Mediterranean and vegan and pescatarian and paleo and keto and Whole30 and AIP. And of course, the snack walls. All of this sounded good at the time, but nothing worked. And when I say nothing worked, nothing was sustainable. And it wasn't until I came clean with myself that I was able to start losing the weight. And the low point was another Sunday. And I'm eating that 3rd pint of ice cream. And my spoon is scraping the bottom of the ice cream container. Like that last piece of tiny bit of chocolate and ice cream that's in the cardboard groove, and I'm trying to get it out. And I felt so disgusted with myself. There was so much shame around the binge eating, how I'm failing myself as a health coach. I'm completely out of integrity with myself. And how I felt like a complete fraud because I wasn't walking my walk. And this is a hard truth to admit, that it doesn't matter how much you weigh or how healthy you eat most of the time. If you are struggling with emotional eating, that food noise is always going to win. And at some point, your waistline is always going to lose. That's when I realized it wasn't just me. There's so many women in midlife. They're battling that same demanding lifestyle with going from career to home and family and all of the things. And on top of it, they're battling the food noise and the shame and the same food noise and shame that I was. I knew that I needed to do something different. And that's when emotional eating forensics and my 3-step process was born. Because once you know what's driving your cravings, you can dismantle them before they even take over. Because this is a brain-based process to break those patterns that are driving the cravings at the source. Because let's be honest, if the willpower and the diets and the counting calories actually worked, you wouldn't be searching for answers. So I became obsessed. I went full on investigator mode. I put the FBI hat back on, put my training back to work. And I wanted to uncover what the weight loss industry doesn't want you to know. Because it's not what we are told to focus on. It's not about the calories and the cardio and the weight. It's not even about the food. It's about addressing those root cause triggers, addressing those automatic eating patterns that are driving our behaviors. Those patterns control everything. And in order for things to change, you need to rewire those patterns in your brain to work in your favor. And that is when everything changed. Not just for me, for the women who I coach. I want you to pay attention to what I'm about to say because this is important. I am a firm believer in individualized wellness, which is why my strategy works across the board. Because I don't force my students and clients into a box or a certain diet or a certain protocol. This is a very specific process on learning how to understand yourself and actually learning how to brainwash yourself so that you can put an end to the overeating and the stress eating and the emotional eating so that you can learn what food is ideal for you. Because what that influencer online is touting as the healthiest and the best food that you can eat for weight loss, well, guess what? It might be inflammatory for you. It might cause you to actually gain weight. More on that in a minute. And if you remember one thing, yes, steal my strategy, but I want you to do it in a way that's best for you. So quick visual, and then I'm going to share exactly what I did. Our brain is like a well-worn path in the woods. It has one and only path that it knows, and that is food equals comfort. Our goal with this 4-step process that I'm about to share, it's how I got out the work gloves and the work boots and cleared a new path in the woods for my brain. So the old path is food equals comfort. We are creating a new path in your brain, and that is food equals food. That's exactly what I did, and that's exactly what I'm going to teach you how to do. So I trained my brain to do this automatically, and it's the exact same process that I teach my students how to do inside of the Break Emotional Eating Accelerator and my private clients as well. And you might be listening. You may have heard me share this in the past. So I invite you to playful out. I invite you to listen for something that you may not have heard before. Because today I am sharing what I did specifically as it relates to these steps. And I have never shared it this way before. Step 1 is see it, because awareness is everything. If you don't have an awareness, you're always going to be playing defense. You're always going to be flying blind. So the first step that I did was to get brutally honest with myself. And I mapped everything out on paper, what my food triggers were, when they happened, why they happened. I even went back in history and identified a bunch of patterns. Now, I knew that ice cream and popcorn were my number one favorite reward foods. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I was aware of my routine. But here's the difference. It's not just, oh, I know that. Because one of the worst things that you can say is, I already know that. This is your brain convincing you you're fine, you don't need to change. Our brain is brilliant in creating all kinds of stories and narratives to keep you stuck exactly where you are. Because our brain wants safety, and change is the biggest threat to our brain. Change actually happens when you open up this awareness to, what does this actually mean? Because it's never about the food, it's what the food represents. And when I was able to stare at my food monsters in black and white, written out on paper, it became real to me. And then I had to stop justifying why I was doing it and actually take full responsibility. I had to admit that what I was doing, it wasn't working. I had to admit to myself that even though my brain is convincing me that I'm eating healthy and I'm getting my exercise, that it wasn't working. Step 2 is stop it. I made 4 changes in this step, which were huge needle movers for me in making just overall progress with my health and my weight. They completely changed the way that I teach and I coach. And full disclosure, I was vegan and then vegan-ish, if that's a thing, for years. And not so much for the animals, but more because I was convinced that it was the best for my health after battling breast cancer and fighting some pretty severe symptoms from Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease that affects your thyroid. So I was so convinced so much that vegan was the only way. I just refused to accept any other way of eating. And I sat on my high horse as a health coach because I believed my way was the only best way to be healthy. And because I still had those comfort food cravings and the sweet tooth cravings. So in addition to eating primarily plant-based, all of the quote unquote health food that I purchased, it was gluten-free and organic and vegan. But the problem was these were just labels. These foods, they were still processed. They were still full of sugar, even though they had more natural alternatives. They were still full of seed oils and chemicals. I was still eating junk food. Only now I'm paying twice as much and getting half the amount. And I was convinced that I was eating healthy. So the first change that I made was to just stop this all or nothing and polarizing mindset of what eating healthy is. And I started to look at it from a different perspective. The second shift that I made was what I later coined Intake 17. It's based on an elimination diet, but I do it in a very specific way. This is another tool that my clients and my students get inside of the Break Emotional Eating Accelerator. Because what I found is that many of these quote unquote superfoods that I thought were healthy, they're actually causing a huge amount of inflammation. This protocol right here that I developed was what made me a 100% believer in individualized wellness. And I have been a completely different coach ever since. And my clients are getting the biggest breakthroughs because of it. I mean, I love it. They're get on a Zoom and they kind of stand up and they do the pants, like, look how much room I have. The third shift that I made was to use the brain science of neuroplasticity combined with my skills in FBI counterintelligence to incorporate what I call tripwires or countermeasures to basically retrain my brain so that instead of just automatically reaching for the comfort food like I always did, that old path in the woods, I'm training my brain to go down a different path. I'm training my brain to do something different, to eat healthier food. And when I say healthier food, I mean healthier food for me. And this step right here, it also really helped to just tame the reward weekends of binge eating my favorite comfort foods. And the fourth shift that I made was to become, I guess, what I would call diet agnostic. I gave myself permission to just put the detective hat on, to stay in curiosity. I gave myself permission to have a blank slate because I wanted to approach this from a perspective of I'm not eating based on what everyone else says to eat. I'm not eating based on what all of the nutritionists and the dietitians and the health coaches say to eat. I'm eating based on what is best for me. And what was best for me was to ease up on those vegan-ish ideas and start incorporating more meat, specifically more red meat into my diet. Now, let me put this into perspective for you, because other than once a year eating pulled pork at a barbecue, which technically isn't even red meat, I, at this point, hadn't eaten red meat in probably 30, 40 years. This was huge. And I had to literally brainwash myself just to keep an open mind, just to stay in curiosity. But it worked. And the puzzle pieces are starting to come together. Which brings us to step 3. This is shift it. This is the phase where my brain is now making the automatic choice to go down the new path, more so than the old path. So we have that old path of food equals comfort, and my brain now made a new path in the woods. This was when healthier choices, and again, healthier choices for me, they're now made automatically. My brain is now going down this new path. This was when I dropped 15 pounds and I went from my weight at the time was 130 and I went down to hovering around 115. And again, 5'1". I've got to get up on my tippy toes to keep my head above water in the shallow end of the pool. So 115 was a healthy weight for me. And I was really excited about landing here. And especially after weighing 130 for so long, I felt so much better. My clothes fit better. And that's the good news. But this is also when some really crazy things started to happen that I was not expecting. So first was that I was petrified that the weight that I had lost, those 15 pounds, that I was just going to gain it right back. Because again, when I was between 48 and 49, that weight, those 20 pounds came right back on super quick. So I'm convinced that it's going to happen again. I was convinced that I'm going to fall back into these emotional eating habits. Like I just knew that this was not going to last. And I'm one of those people, I weigh myself, I don't know, maybe twice a week, give or take, just to kind of check in. And every time I jumped on the scale, I held my breath. Like I'm like praying that it was going to stay where it did. I couldn't wrap my head around that this 15-pound weight loss was actually real. But it was. And second, and this ticked me off, no one noticed. My weight went from 130 to 115 and no one noticed. No one. Not one single person. The weight loss was so gradual. I mean, that could have been why, but even looking back at photos, what made me even madder was that I couldn't tell the difference. I couldn't tell the difference between when I weighed 130 or 115. So if I can't tell, how am I supposed to expect that anyone else is going to notice? But despite being totally paranoid about the weight coming back and low-key annoyed that no one noticed and I couldn't even tell the difference, I could feel the difference. There wasn't starvation. There wasn't deprivation. My healthier choices they were automatic, they were effortless. It became a part of my lifestyle. And what I realized over time is that everything stayed in place. And this is what I help my clients do, is to keep this sustainability in place as a part of your lifestyle because it needs to be effortless. You can't be in this, I have to be on a diet mode if you want to sustain it. You need to get it to a place where you're not even thinking about it. And that's exactly where I ended up. Now, I was happy to plateau at 115 because I in my head, I'm like, well, I'd like to get it down to 110, back to my old fighting weight, as they say. But my rationale was like, okay, I stayed at 115 forever. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm in my 50s. My metabolism is a lot more stubborn. And at 115, I still had quite a bit of extra fat in the jigglies. And I'm like, well, I'm totally fine being here if this is my final resting weight. I'm still in a healthy range, even with a little bit of extra fat and jigglies. Like, I'm totally fine. But I was not prepared for what happened next because that's when I finally broke through this plateau that I had for over a year. Now, the best part of implementing these 3 steps, the see it, stop it, shift it, is that the food noise and the food monsters were completely gone. There was no obsessive pull towards my favorite comfort foods, the ice cream and the popcorn and the chocolate. None. I could be in the same room with them. I could have them in the freezer, have them in the pantry, and have zero interest eating them. The 4th and final step is what I call spark it. This is the step when I learned to balance my hunger hormones, boost my metabolism, and reduce the cortisol and the inflammation. And when I implemented this step, I lost 2 pounds in my first week, and 5 pounds total in that first month. This is when 110 pounds became my new healthy resting weight, my ideal goal weight. Here's something important that I want you to realize. This is so much more than the victory on the scale. And in full compliance, I can't make any claims for your results, but I can share what happened to me throughout this journey. I put Hashimoto's, the autoimmune disease that I had, into complete remission. I look and feel 20 years younger. My energy is through the roof. I no longer have those afternoon crashes. My hair it's thicker, it's stronger. I've actually reversed the graying process. My skin's youthful and glowing now. The cellulite in my legs, it's almost completely gone. And remember, I was 110 pounds before when I was a competitive athlete. And I was a complete junk foodaholic. So this time around, it's totally different because my focus wasn't the scale. It was my overall health and wellness. It was my metabolic health. It was eating for optimal longevity. It was truly becoming the happiest and most peaceful version of myself. So how did I break past that stubborn plateau? What's the secret to step 4, Spark It? This is when I introduced an all-natural weight loss supplement into my daily regimen. Now, if you're anything like me, you're also probably a certified skeptic when it comes to anything weight loss related. Because I don't know about you, but I have had decades of been there, done that, sorely disappointed. Remember I talked about all the diet stuff that I had tried before? That's one of the reasons why we focus on getting to the root cause rather than going on a diet. But sometimes you need an assist, and especially when we're in our 40s and 50s and beyond, and especially when you're doing everything right. And again, I'll admit, I was extremely skeptical when I tried this all-natural weight loss supplement. I was like, okay, here we go again. And I had zero expectations because, again, I was already at 115 and already at what most people would consider a healthy weight for my size. But taking this all-natural weight loss supplement, this was the final push that helped me to get past that plateau that I had been at for over a year. And for the record, I want to be perfectly clear. I do not believe in magic pills, and this is not it. There's no magic anything that's going to drop the weight for you. But these all-natural balance drops, they are paired with the neuroplasticity and the brain work and the food changes. This was the catalyst. And this is also when the craziest thing happened. Everyone, and I mean everyone, started commenting on my weight. They started commenting on how good I looked. They're like, oh my goodness, you lost all this weight. What did you do? And it started when I lost 2 pounds. I literally went from 115 to 113. And I'm walking around and people are like, oh my goodness, you lost so much weight. What did you do? I'm thinking, 2 pounds? For the record, I could care less about the external validation. I mean, it's nice when people notice, but here's the thing, is that because they noticed, and because my clients also started seeing just phenomenal results with the balance drops, I knew that the 3-step process needed a 4th step. And that's when the 4th step, Spark It, was added into this 3-step protocol. So remember how I said about the food noise and the food monsters? Remember how I said how all of that disappeared after I incorporated See It, Stop It, Shift It? And then after implementing that 4th and final step, Spark It, something better happened. On the rare occasion that I'm around homemade ice cream, which, by the way, is the only kind I would even think about eating, none of the chemical stuff from the store, that's disgusting. I was able to finally enjoy a few bites of ice cream and put the spoon down. There was no obsession. There was nothing. I just had a few bites. I savored it, and that was it. That's how powerful this process has been for me. And now at the time of this recording, there have been several hundred women who have gone through the process inside of the Break Emotional Eating Accelerator, and they are seeing similar results in days, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, 20 days. What took me years to figure out, I've been able to collapse time for them. I've given them a targeted solution where they have also won the battle against their own food noise and their own food monsters. And if you've been listening today and you've been thinking about how frustrated you've been with your own journey of losing weight and gaining it back and losing weight and gaining it back, you've tried the diets, you've tried to eat healthy, but the nighttime snacking, that mindless overeating, it always takes over. I want to invite you to take the next step with me. I want you to imagine what life is going to look like when you are no longer thinking about food 24/7. When you can walk into the kitchen or the pantry and not have that obsessive pull to just eat everything in sight. That's why I created the Break Emotional Eating Accelerator, where you can dismantle your food cravings at the source in as little as 10 to 30 days without dieting and without any kind of restriction. And best part, for less than the cost of a typical Target run. And when you're ready to go even deeper, I'll show you how to use the all-natural skinny drops to spark your metabolism safely. And I'll leave a link in the show notes, or you can DM me on Instagram at holly.bertone, Bertone, with the word reset. Reset. And I'll give you everything you need to learn more about the Break Emotional Eating Accelerator and also the balance drops. My friend, you deserve to feel lighter, not just physically, but emotionally too. It is time to do this once and for all with a proven system that's designed for your busy life. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Holly Bertone, your emotional eating profiler and coach, and this is Weight Loss Forensics.